A bitter February wind tears through Stirling Castle as temperatures plunge to -7 degrees Fahrenheit. Ice forms on the interior walls, inside the building. A modern human in these conditions would develop hypothermia within 2 hours. Yet during medieval winters, 40 knights slept in these chambers night after night for months at a time. No central heating, no insulated walls, windows without glass. Some nights, wine in the cellars froze solid. So how did medieval warriors not just survive but remain combat-ready through winters that would kill most people today? The popular image of medieval castles involves roaring fireplaces and warm beds with heavy furs. But archaeological evidence reveals a harsher truth. Castle interiors during winter were often colder than outside. Stone walls trapped cold inside. At Conwy Castle, frost regularly formed on interior walls. At Dover, ice accumulated in stairwells. At Warwick, sleeping chambers dropped below freezing for weeks. Medieval builders couldn't simply add more fireplaces. Stone walls absorbed heat so slowly that warming a chamber took 12 hours of burning, but dropped back to freezing within 3 hours once the fire died. They couldn't seal windows. Arrow slits were permanent defensive features creating constant drafts. But recent discoveries reveal heating systems so sophisticated that Victorian renovators couldn't recognize them. They saw construction errors. They filled the channels with rubble and sealed them forever. They destroyed 150 years of knowledge in a single afternoon. What they missed would challenge everything we think we know about medieval survival. Bedding systems that created 60-degree temperature differentials, heating networks using physics that wouldn't be formally described for another 300 years, and communal arrangements so effective that modern military forces still teach them today. But before medieval people could solve the problem of staying warm, they first had to survive the brutal reality of why castles were designed to freeze them. Every feature that made a castle defensible made it uninhabitable. Arrow slits weren't just for shooting arrows. Dover Castle studies show each slit created a wind tunnel with 20 miles per hour winds outside. Air velocity through a slit reached 35 miles per hour. One arrow slit could drop a 400-square-foot chamber temperature by 10 degrees. Dover Castle has over 100 arrow slits. But the walls themselves were worse. A 2019 Historic England thermal study found that a stone wall 10 feet thick at 45 degrees would require 12 hours of heating to reach 55 degrees, but would return to 45 degrees in under 3 hours once heating stopped. Medieval builders weren't heating rooms. They were trying to heat millions of pounds of stone that actively resisted temperature change. Medieval accounts describe knights who would roast their fronts and freeze their backs, turning like meat on a spit. But medieval builders understood something crucial. If the entire castle couldn't be heated, don't try. Analysis of 47 major castles shows a consistent pattern. The solar, private sleeping chambers was positioned in the southwest corner, receiving most winter sunlight. Built on upper floors above the Great Hall, so rising heat warmed floors from below. Deliberately smaller than lower rooms because smaller volumes hold warmth longer. At Warwick Castle, thermal imaging showed the solar maintained temperatures 18 to 22 degrees warmer than guard rooms, even with no active fires. The positioning alone created a passive thermal advantage. Inside these chambers, thick tapestries hung 6 to 8 inches from walls, creating insulating air gaps. A 2021 Cambridge study found this technique reduced wall heat loss by 40%. But the real innovation was hidden in the walls. In 1893, renovating Château de Vincennes, workers found a shaft running vertically through the wall. a hollow channel about 8 inches wide. Victorian architects assumed it was a construction error. They filled it with rubble and sealed it. They destroyed a 400-year-old heating system. That shaft was positioned next to the guardrobe. The medieval toilet. Decomposing waste generates significant heat. The shaft captured rising warm air and channeled it upward through the wall. A 2018 thermal study at Goodrich Castle showed heated walls maintain temperatures 12 to 15 degrees warmer than unheated walls, 24 hours a day with zero fuel cost. Medieval builders turned human waste into central heating, and we destroyed the evidence because we couldn't imagine they were that clever. But architecture alone couldn't solve the core problem. At night, when fires died and everyone slept for 8 hours, even the best chambers would lose warmth. Medieval people needed technology that maintained warmth for hours without external heating. A 1601 inventory from Hardwick Hall lists a knight's winter bed. 7 separate layers, specific materials, precise ordering. When modern sleep scientists analyzed these records, they discovered something remarkable. Medieval bedding was precision thermal engineering that had to maintain body temperature for 10 hours with zero external heat. And it worked better than modern sleeping bags. Layer 1, 18 to 24 inches of wheat straw. Straw's hollow stems trap air in thousands of chambers, preventing heat transfer. Fresh straw undergoes gentle decomposition that generates warmth. The bed itself was a heat source. A study from 2020 found it elevated bed temperature by 5 to 7 degrees. Layer 2, 6 to 8 inches of goose down. Feathers are 80% air by volume. That trapped air prevents body heat from escaping downward. Added 8 to 10 degrees of warmth. Layer 3, multiple linen sheets. Linen wicks moisture away while absorbing up to 20% of its weight without feeling wet. Humans release a pint of water vapor during sleep. In a sealed environment, that moisture condenses and freezes. Sleeping in frozen bedding causes hypothermia. The linen sheets were a moisture management system. Analysis of preserved medieval linens shows 2 different weaves: tight weave for summer, loose weave for winter. They understood moisture transport physics 400 years before the science was formally described. Layers 4 and 5, 2 wool blankets in specific order. First, tight weave merino wool creating a wind barrier. Second, loose weave Welsh wool for insulation. Together, these added 15 to 20 degrees, but only if placed in the correct order. Layer 6, fur coverlet placed hair side down. Fur fibers trap warm air rising from below, reflecting heat back downward. Added 10 to 12 degrees. Layer 7, heavy wool bed curtains enclosing the entire bed. A 2020 University of Southampton study reconstructed a medieval bed. With chamber temperature at 35 degrees, the bed interior stabilized at 68 to 72 degrees within 90 minutes and maintained it through 8 hours. The complete system created a 60-degree temperature differential. A knight could sleep in warmth while the chamber froze. But here's what modern scientists found most remarkable. The system was designed to breathe. Moisture wicked up through linen, absorbed by wool, passed through fur, escaped through curtains. Modern sleeping bags trap moisture, leading to wet cold, more dangerous because water conducts heat 25 times faster than air. Medieval knights solved this 700 years before modern material science. The proof? After Agincourt in 1415, thousands of French nobles were imprisoned in English castles through winter. Records show mortality from illness among French prisoners was lower than among English guards. The French nobles had negotiated to keep their personal bedding. They slept in 7-layer systems. English guards used standard military bedding, straw, and 2 blankets. The prisoners survived winter better than their guards, not because of wealth, because of superior engineering. But a complete 7-layer system cost 6 months of a knight's salary. Common soldiers couldn't afford it. During sieges, supplies ran short. Medieval forces needed a solution that worked without expensive materials. Excavations at Conwy Castle revealed guard chambers of 400 square feet where 25 to 30 men slept regularly. For modern observers, that's overcrowding. For medieval soldiers, it was thermal engineering. A resting adult produces 100 to 120 BTUs per hour, like a 100-watt light bulb. 30 men produce 3,000 to 3,600 BTUs per hour, equivalent to a space heater running continuously. The human body became the heating system. The primary pattern: men slept in alternating head-to-foot configurations. 40% of body heat escapes through the head. Alternating head-to-foot means each person's head is near another's well-insulated torso. Heat escaping from one person's head warms the person next to them. A 2019 experimental study tested this. 20 volunteers spent a night in a reconstructed guard chamber at 30 degrees with no heating. Same direction sleeping caused discomfort and mild hypothermia signs. An alternating pattern kept everyone comfortable with normal core temperatures. The arrangement itself was a heat distribution technology. Junior soldiers slept on outside positions near cold walls, while senior soldiers were in the middle. This was not a privilege, it was tactical preservation. Young soldiers were the healthiest and most replaceable. Veterans held institutional knowledge that took years to replace. Positions rotated every 2 hours through the night. This prevented anyone from losing too much heat, maintained unit readiness, and distributed warmth fairly. The evidence: the Siege of Orléans from 1428 to 1429. English forces maintained a winter siege for 7 months. Medical records show frostbite in only 12% of forces versus the expected 25 to 30%. Cold deaths were 3% versus historical averages of 15 to 20%. Archaeological excavations in 2016 revealed why. English forces had excavated underground chambers 4 to 5 feet deep, each housing 30 to 40 men. A single entrance for heat retention. Straw-lined walls. A central brazier for minimal heating. A 2019 reconstruction measured performance. The exterior at 20 degrees, while the underground chamber stabilized at 58 to 62 degrees, maintained by body heat after just 2 to 3 hours of brazier heating. But castle guards couldn't all sleep warm. Someone had to man the walls. Guard logs from Warwick Castle, 1403, document a 2-shift system. Shift 1, dusk to midnight, 4 hours. In cold. Return to the heated chamber, core temperature recovers over 2 hours. Sleep 6 hours in warmth. Shift 2, midnight to dawn. Coldest period, but fresh guards who'd been warm, essentially preheated before cold exposure. Return to the chamber during the warmest part of the day for recovery. Modern physiology research shows this reduces cold injury by 60 to 70%. The most remarkable example, Christmas Eve, 1314, Scottish siege of Stirling Castle. English defenders faced record cold. Descriptions suggest well below zero. The garrison commander ordered all soldiers, regardless of rank, into communal chambers. Knights slept beside stable boys. Records note the decision saved 50 souls from winter's grip, perhaps 80. But the next morning offered generous surrender terms. The garrison refused. Not because conditions improved, but because that night of shared survival created a bond stronger than fear of cold and hierarchy. But there was one more innovation, so advanced that when engineers analyzed it in the 2010s, they couldn't believe medieval people understood the required physics. In 1893, workers at Château de Vincennes found hollow channels running through castle walls, vertical shafts about 12 inches wide, stretching from foundations to roof. Victorian architects concluded they were construction errors. They filled them with rubble and sealed them. They destroyed one of the most sophisticated pre-industrial heating systems. Those channels weren't mistakes. They were heat distribution networks using thermodynamics principles that wouldn't be formally described until the 1700s. Medieval masons constructed double walls with 18 to 24-inch gaps, left hollow, creating vertical channels. These connected to lower floor fireplaces and had designed openings. At the top, the entire wall became a heat distribution system. Fire heated air in the connected channel. Hot air rose, transferring heat to stones on both sides. The wall became a radiator, slowly warming stones that radiated heat into rooms on either side. Cooler air descended through connected passages, creating natural circulation. The system operated 24/7 with minimal fuel. The same fire heating the hall also heated chambers above. But here's what's remarkable. It was tunable. Analysis at Bodiam Castle revealed adjustable vents. Stone shutters at the base and peak could be opened or closed to regulate airflow. Medieval castles had room-by-room climate control, 500 years before central heating. A 2018 Cambridge engineering study analyzed functioning heat. Walls at Bodiam. Medieval builders had optimized channel dimensions based on principles modern HVAC engineers recognize immediately. The 12-inch width maximizes airflow while maintaining laminar flow. Smooth, silent air movement. The 20 to 30-foot height creates ideal stack effect pressure. The 8 to 10-inch stone thickness balances heat transfer speed against thermal mass storage. These weren't crude approximations. They were calculated designs achieving efficiency levels that impress modern engineers. At Dover, a functioning system studied in 2015 showed a single hearth fire heating 400 square feet of hall, also warmed over 3,000 square feet of upper chambers. The system used 60% less fuel than individual fireplaces. Stone walls stored heat during peak burning, releasing it slowly through the night. If the fire went out, warm walls maintained elevated temperatures for 8 to 10 hours. Modern central heating loses heat within 2 to 3 hours of failure. Medieval heat walls were more robust than modern systems. Victorian renovators destroyed approximately 90% of systems between 1850 and 1920. They found hollow channels and assumed they weakened walls, so filled them with rubble. Not rediscovered until thermal imaging in the 2010s allowed researchers to see heat patterns in walls. The proof: winter of 1338 at Stirling Castle. Chronicles describe one of the harshest medieval winters, cold enough to freeze the well solid. Modern estimates suggest minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit or colder. Casualty records show only 3 deaths from cold among 200 men over 4 months, 1.5% mortality. Compare Napoleon's Moscow retreat in 1812. 90% died from cold. German army outside Leningrad in 1941. 15 to 20% monthly cold casualties. Medieval soldiers with 14th century technology survived extreme cold, better than 19th and 20th century armies. Recent thermal imaging shows those channels, after 700 years, still carry warm air more efficiently than modern ductwork installed in the 1960s. Between 1500 and 1700, Europe's climate changed. Winters became milder, average temperatures up 2 to 3 degrees. The survival pressure driving medieval innovation gradually disappeared. Knowledge wasn't deliberately destroyed, it was abandoned because it was no longer needed. When Victorians studied medieval castles in the 1800s, winters had been mild so long they couldn't imagine why medieval people would build such. Knowledge remained lost until the 2010s, when thermal imaging changed everything, and modern military organizations now teach medieval techniques. The current U.S. Army Cold Weather Operations Manual includes group sleeping arrangements, identical to medieval configurations. NATO Arctic training teaches layered insulation with natural materials. FEMA winter disaster shelter designs use double wall construction with dead air space. Medieval tapestry principles. All modern innovations are actually 700 years old. Consider this. A night in a medieval castle with heat walls and proper bedding maintained a chamber temperature of 55 to 60 degrees and a bed temperature of 70 degrees using one small fire. A modern house drops to 40 degrees within 6 hours of a power outage. In specific metrics, medieval technology outperformed what we use today. We look at stone castles and see cold fortresses where people suffered. Medieval people saw sophisticated climate control keeping hundreds alive through winters that would kill most of us. Primitive doesn't mean stupid. It means solving the same problems with different materials, and sometimes solving them better. Nights in frozen castles weren't enduring misery. They were warm, not because they were tougher, but because they were smarter about solving problems with available materials. They couldn't increase energy input. No fossil fuels, no electricity. They had to maximize efficiency, eliminate waste, and understand the deep physics of heat and cold. We've become dependent on systems that fail catastrophically when power stops. Medieval systems couldn't fail, designed around passive principles that work regardless. Heat rises, stone stores warmth, wool insulates, body heat accumulates. These are physical laws, not technologies requiring maintenance and fuel. The next time your heating fails and you're shivering in your modern, insulated home, remember, in a 700-year-old castle with 10-foot stone walls and windows without glass, a medieval knight slept warmer than you are right now. Not because he was tougher, but because he was smarter.